Hello and welcome. My name is Zafar Iqbal, and you are watching the Mojo Story. Manipur is bleeding. The state has been on the boil for more than a year. There have been intermittent periods of lull, but violence has never really ended in that state. But now there has been a spurt in violence. There was an encounter, and that encounter at the same time, six people were abducted, and later bodies of three women and three children were found. And now there are reports that there have been protests in Manipur. People have been really storming the houses of the MLAs. An ancestral house of the chief minister was also attacked. Amid all of this, Home Minister Amit Shah cancelled his rallies in Maharashtra to take a security review meeting about the situation in Manipur. Armed Force Special Powers Act has been reimposed in six police stations as the state continues to be on the edge. To discuss what is happening in the state and why a sudden spurt in violence, we are joined by Tirthankar, who's a Meitei voice. Welcome to show, Mr. Tirthankar. And we're also joined by Dr. Mary Grace, who's an academic and a Kuki voice. If I may start with you, Dr. Mary, how do you see this situation? This seems to be only escalating. There seems to be no bridge that are formed between the two communities. It's quite the opposite, that the violence is only spreading, and the response of the government is to send in more troops. 70 additional companies have been sent to Manipur. Where is the state heading?
Good afternoon, Jafarji. Thank you so much for having me in this show. It is really indeed very unfortunate that the present violence have resulted in the sufferings from both the communities. And I do strongly condemn whatever violence is against the women and children. And having said that, it doesn't mean that if you just go by the chronology of um, what has been happening in the violence, you can really see that I'm not saying that the suffering of one community is lesser than the other community, but then if you really go back and see, you can just go back and see from 4th May, where the women have been, um, uh, women like Olivia and Florence who have been raped, and that rape has been the imams who are called the Mera Paibis, very much part of all those rape, who have instigated all those things. And then if you really see what the Kukizo have really suffered, so you can, it's innumerable, where a tax officer who have been burned alive, and you can see a young boy like Tonsing Hang Sing, who is just 7 year old,
Tragedy is from
who have
both the
been
sides.
burned alive. So
Tragedy
everybody
is from
knows
both the
about it.
sides.
But then I'm
There
just,
yeah.
yeah, but I know, see, one thing is that I need to make it clear on this channel is that both sufferings are there on both sides. But if you really go by the chronology, you will always find that who have done the barbaric acts. So I've been telling that, I've been from the beginning of the violence, after 1 month of the violence, I've been on the national TV telling that we cannot be we cannot be a show for both the communities, cannot be a show for for the media people, for the outside community outside. So it's high time that we have to know, uh, just because when you suffer, that you realize the suffering of people. But we have the cookies. So if you really go by that, you have to know that people have been telling that, oh, it happened in Churachandpur also, where houses have been burned. Oh, I do agree that the mob have burned a house. But if you really see the mob, when the mob were trying to attack the Meiteis who are in Churachandpur, you can see that the women have formed a chain, and then they have not allowed the angry mob to even attack the Meiteis, who are the Meitei community who are settling in Churachandpur. And that's how they've walked. I would say they have walked out of Churachandpur. But if
Oh,
you really go by, because it's very important to always see back and see what's happening on the 3rd or 4th of May. So you see that in Imphal, you'll see that people have been really chased like animals. And I'm just trying to recall back and say that the army flag march, which happened on 17th of November, if that had happened on 4th, 5th, or 6th of May, I think the violence would have been abated. So we have
Right.
to really
So,
see how the violence have started. Not that
so
18 months you start saying that, oh, our women and children. I'm not. I do really condemn whoever have done it, but still, then like we have to know that past 16 months or 17 months, the other community have
right,
suffered these loss,
right.
this
Let us
type of
let us
sufferings.
let us ask Mr.
You cannot allow,
Tirthankar.
yeah, that's,
Yeah,
you have
let's
to
ask Mr.
really look back. I think it's very,
Right,
it's
right.
very
You may
important to introspect ourselves, retrospect ourselves, how we
right,
have acted, how women have acted,
right.
how the young boys have acted.
Right.
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you.
Tirthankar, the point is that who is in control of the state? Is anybody in control of Manipur right now? When we see that houses of legislators are attacked, civilians are abducted, they're killed, encounters are taking place, so many things are happening on the ground. There is a demand for the imposition of AFSPA. AFSPA is imposed in some areas. There is another set of people who say revoke the AFSPA. What is happening in Manipur?
So, first of all, thank you for having me at the show. I would say the public in general have reached a level of frustration where they think the state government or the central government is not taking seriously the autocracies which are happening in the region. Right? First of all, whenever there are conflicts between two communities, there are certain red lines that is not crossed on a humanitarian ground. And when children and women are involved and when they are made victims, it takes the conflict to the next dimension, the next level, which is unacceptable in any form, right? And when that was not being prevented by the central forces which are present on the ground as of today, the public starts thinking, who is protecting us when women and children can be actually abducted from their houses and brutally murdered, and when there are no consequences for these kind of barbaric actions, the public in general, thinks like the people who we've elected to save people from such aristocracies in that particular place are not able to do that. Then why are they there in a position of power, right? So I think it is questioning the people who are still in power, not taking the appropriate steps to stop these violences, which are getting out of hand day by day, right? So I think there has to be a bigger mandate of disarming the general public and making sure there's a peaceful environment that such acts do not happen again, right? Because when women and children are involved, it takes the conflict to the next level. And generally, in any fight, even in a war, there is a decorum to be followed, and here that is not being followed, which is very unfortunate, I would say. And I agree that both the communities are suffering, but what we are seeing is that the aggressiveness, by attacking children and women, have started, being more aggressive in recent times, and this needs to be curbed, right? And who curbs it? Again, it is the people in power who need to make sure that the necessary laws are followed in this particular region for that peace to be maintained. Now, when
But
people are not
but
doing that, or when the
but
people
Mr.
in power,
Tirthankar, the point is that the state is ruled by a government. Biren Singh is in charge, and these things are happening. It's not the first time this has happened. It looks like that he's not able to take control of the situation. The center is intervening. They're sending more companies of troops. Is it time for perhaps for Biren Singh government to change, to shift, and to bring some other dispensation that can perhaps resolve this issue? There are also talks about a central rule being imposed in Manipur. If this system is not worked, what is the option? What are the other alternatives that are there that can be looked into to resolve this issue in the short term, to bring some sort of a peace and stability, and then perhaps in the long term things can be looked in a different through a different prism.
for sure, and as I stated before, the powers of the state government is very limited in such conflicts because of the limited resources, right? If the center feels that the state government is not equipped equipped well enough to control these things, they can make a decision and do whatever that needs to be done. From what I'm seeing as of now, the center believes that the government in power at the state is capable enough to handle it, which I may be wrong or right about it. But the center needs to take that step, whatever is necessary to curb the violence. And I don't have the political influence or the thought process to say this is right or this is wrong. But if the center feels that something needs to be done, they should go ahead and do it. Right? It's up to them, because at the end of the day, we depend a lot on center for what is being done on the ground here. Right? So if the center feels that the state government is not doing a good enough job, it's the prerogative is on them to take the necessary action.
Right. Dr. Mary, the responsibility for the center is to take some concrete steps. The Home Minister convened a meeting, additional forces were sent, there are clear orders to bring the levels of violence down in that state. And that also happens from time to time. There are spells of stability and peace, but then that does not resolve the conflict. It comes back one way or the other. There are civilian casualties, there are encounters taking place. The police say all those killed in the encounter were militants, and now we're reading reports that a coffin march is being organized uh, in memory of those who were killed. So, what is happening on the ground is that there is no sense of any stability, no sense of any reconciliation, and everybody seems to be just taking the things as they are and trying to, put some bandage or some band-aid on the wounds rather than trying to do a proper healing of this problem that has plagued the state for such a long time now.
Yeah, uh, thank you, Jafarji, for asking me that question. But before that, like, I would just like to appreciate, like, Tirthankar to bring about, like, the sufferings of the women and children. So, one point we have to know is that, like, uh, that's what I've been telling, like, in my opening remark, that, like, for the past 16 months, more than 16 months, we have been shouting, like, how the women and children from the Kuki's side, like, where 20 women have been raped and killed and, like, or brutally murdered or burnt alive. So it's not the first time that all these things have happened. I'm not trying to neutralize anything at all. But the thing is that, like, if it all these voices have been raised 16 months ago, I don't think this violence would have come till at this level, at this scale. So I think it's though it's never too late. I think we have been trying to say that I'm sure, like, the Meitei committees have been telling that, okay, Biren Singh is not doesn't have the power, but then as a chief minister, it is his duty. The duty of the state is to protect the lives and properties of the citizens of the state. So it's very pertinent that, like, the state, if the chief minister is not able to do anything of his own, like, he has to either resign. Of course, that resignation was there, like, which was almost like a drama, like, which was happening, like, where the resignation papers were torn apart. So all these things were there, but then I think all these, it's not that we are against one community, but the thing that, like, we have to put the onus on this on the head of the state, which is very important. We cannot keep on saying the center when the head of the state realizes that, like, he cannot do anything on his own anymore. Then he has to lay down and say that, okay, I can't do it anymore. But with all the Manipur tapes, the audio tapes, the leak audio tapes coming up, it's very clear that, like, the violence has been premeditated, and then that's how, like, he has been claiming that he is responsible for this, and he has done it for the good of the Meitei community. All these are the things. So you will always see that, like, whenever the Mera Paivis or anybody have a rally or a protest, they'll always say, kill all the cookies. And have you seen any rally which is happening in either Churchandpur or in any cookies or dominated areas, like, where they'll never say that, like, kill all the, we always ask for justice. So
Okay.
these are the things we have
Dr.
to know.
Mac,
And then regarding Jafarji, I'll just like to just talk about the Coffin March. You've talked about the Coffin March. What I've analyzed is that, see, regarding these 10 people who have been killed, who have been in fact mowed down by the CRPF on blank fire, because if you say that there's a, as far as my understanding is concerned, like if there is any gunfight between, so either of the two sides will always have some casualty, but you only see that like 10 people have on one side 10 people have died, whereas you say that like they are holding like all sophisticated weapons. If I hold some sophisticated weapons, at least I'll gun down like one person like before I die. So if you just see like the equation, like it's very totally which is totally very wrong narrative which has been displayed, and this has been going on. And the other thing is that like there are even videos where these 10 people, out of the 10 people, about 3 4 of them, they have been even hit by the shovel by the CRPF, and which is very unbecoming of a CRPF, an armed personnel, to
although the
torture
police
people
says,
like that. Okay,
although the
and then the
police
other thing is that these 10 people, out of quite many of them, the eyes have been plucked out, which you already discussed in this channel. I don't have to repeat it again. So these are the things we have to know. And then what about like that lady who has been killed on the 7th of November, like who have been burned alive, 99% burn, and there's a nail in her femur, and the thigh bones are broken, and only 6 teeth are intact, and then the brain has been taken out. So this type of like inhuman act, how can we
right.
support?
Although the police
I
says
think
that
it's
all
really
those,
inhuman. And
uh,
regarding the Coffin March, I'll just tell again. And these 10 soldiers, these 10 village volunteers who have been allegedly said to be like killed in a gunfire by the government. Uh, why the post-mortem report was not provided? If it was fair enough, if you think that like okay, they have been killed
Dr.
in a
Mary,
gunfire, you
Dr. Mary,
provided
although the right,
yeah.
I got you made the point. Although the police says
Hmm.
that all those who were killed in that encounter were militant, but I know the buck stops at the top, the head of the
Hmm.
state, Biren Singh. Kuki community, representatives of Kuki community have been saying that it's time for him to go. But do you think if he goes, the situation will stabilize? Is it just hinged on one person at the top that is making all the difference? Or do you think that there is a systemic failure that is just escalating this conflict in many ways?
But Zafarji, like whatever it is, somewhere it has to start. And the starting point is that for more than 16 months, we have been telling that Biren Singh has been like, it's a state-sponsored violence. And it has been somehow like that has been substantiated with the videos which came up in August. And if you see the sequence of violence in Jiribam, so it's somehow like to some extent re, uh, relates to like the Manipur tapes which has been coming up. So with all those 900 Myanmar militants going to infiltrate and all these things like which cannot be substantiated on the ground, all this misinformation, disinformation which is spread by the state is too much now. So I think Biren somehow for the start like he has to go and I'm nobody to tell, but then the center has to decide, and that's
Right.
why I've been telling that the chief minister has to be responsible. And people have been talking about the legacy of this violence among the many communities. But then in this violence, what you have to know that we cannot go back and see the legacy and say that okay, the cookies and one community and the other community have fought in the year 1991 or 1997 or 1990 or whatever. What I would like to point out is that in all these violence, it never lasted for so long. Somehow, the state has always been the mediator. In this case, the sad part is that the state was always one-sided. This is
Right.
very
That
clear
is
about
that
it.
is that is the allegation
Mm.
of the Kuki community. But Mr. Tirthankar, is there a way forward? Can the two communities come together and resolve their issues? it is very difficult. There are buffer zones that have been created that are separating the members of two communities, and people from one community cannot cross the buffer zone into another area. Situation has reached to this point. Whatever the demands from both the sides, even if those demands are met, do you think this bitterness will ever go?
Mr. First of all, I would like to differ a bit with Dr. Mary on a point that this is state-sponsored violence. I think no state would like people to fight and people from both the communities to suffer and die. We have to remember that equal number of Meiteis as well as Kukis have been displaced. So the blanket statement that this is a state-sponsored violence would be highly inappropriate and wrong, in my view, right? If it was really a one-sided affair, then the other community would be not suffering. I mean, this is just logic which I'm speaking. Now, when it comes to getting peaceful, coordination between the two communities, as I stated earlier as well, why not? Definitely, there can be peace. There should be peace brought about, and but I think that there is a political motive behind making sure that the a peaceful agreement is not reached. As I stated earlier, there have been different communities living in Manipur, and whenever there were issues or problems, it has always been sorted out in a reasonable time frame. What we're seeing here is that over the past year and a half and beyond, this has been extending, and whenever there is some sort of calmness or peace which is trying, to be brought into this equation, extreme violence happens, and both the communities get energized and sensitized, and the anger again goes to the next level, right? So there is a ulterior motive, and I'm sure, because if it was not politically motivated, then understanding and a peaceful resolution could have been brought much before. So we'll have to take it in the sense that there are larger forces are playing here, which is
Yeah.
making it impossible for peace to be brokered within the two communities. I mean, we have been living for so long for together. Why is it that only this time we are not able to sort the issues out? There is nothing when you sit on the table and talk which cannot be sorted out. But the fact that people are not willing to come to the table and talk it out itself is a big thing, which needs to be studied as to why such a situation has been created where peace cannot be brokered between the two communities. Right? We need to look deeper into that, and who are the people stopping it, or who are the forces stopping this from happening.
Dr. Mary, who are these forces that are stopping it from happening? As Mr. Tethankar says, what is it that stops members of two communities to sit down and to start a dialogue process, start with small steps, and then go to the bigger issues which are more controversial in nature, but start with small issues where there is common understanding? At least there will be common understanding as far as civilians are concerned, civilian deaths are concerned, women and children who got involved in this conflict. There is no difference from the two sides. Both sides agree that these things should not happen. Can't the starting point be from that, and then perhaps you take it to the other issues which are more where there are more differing views between the two communities? What is stopping, as Mr. Tirthankar says, that are there larger forces at work here which are stopping the two communities to come to a resolution to end this conflict? What is it that's stopping them to build the bridges?
Uh, See, I'll just get back to whatever I've said, that like the state is like one-sided. In this violence, like what we have been seeing is that, like at least on my personal view, like what I've been analyzing is that, um, supposing like we have I have already mentioned like those rape cases like which has happened, like where a young boy was burned alive with his mother and aunt, and then we have like the tax officer like who has been burned alive, and David Freak who has been beheaded. Like, so I'll just take one example, and then the other one would be like the mentally retarded women, like from the Kukizo community, where she was not willing to leave Imphal, and then that's where she was finally shot dead by allegedly by the Arambai Tengol, and all these things. Like when you just see back, like take the case of David Freak. So David Freak was, which happened on 2nd of July. So you still see that that man, Mr. Mayang, who is in the security of said to be like in the Kumbi MLA security office. So he's still roaming free. And unless you set example of some just form of justice, how can the Kukis believe that like the government is like not one-sided?
No,
And then the other thing is
Dr.
that
Mary, Dr. Mary,
yeah,
I'm not
I'll
talking
just
about
come
the
back. Yeah.
government. I'm not talking about the government. Government is just one part of this whole ecosystem. There are people on the ground who can come together. No government can stop them or force them to come together. After all, it's the people who have to live together in that state. They have been living there for age altogether. Governments come and go. It's for the people to reconcile.
See, Zafarji, like if you talk about that, like at least from our side, like lymphocyte, like the Sioux group, which has been in agreement, have already had talks with the government of India and the other thing that we have just a village volunteers, like we are there. And what I've been telling is that, like since the time the cookies, like almost 100% of the cookies have left Imphal Valley, why should the young boys like from either some part from Imphal Valley have to come and die in the foothills of the hills? So these are the things like, okay, that buffer zone has been created. If the people in the Imphal Valley have maintained that quiet or that semblance of peace, I think, and if they have not come and attacked the hill areas, I don't think like there's not even like a single time like when our village volunteers have crossed over the buffer zone and everything. But you'll always see that like people coming and dying in the foothills or in the hill areas who are mostly settled in Imphal. So these are the type of what we call the examples we have set, and then where we for that we have to where people have started feeling that we need to protect our land because we have not been saved in Imphal, we have been chased away. So the only place where we can settle peacefully is in the hills. So these type of things we have to really understand and come to know about it. And we have seen that we have heard um, mm, some of the human rights activists from even from the Meitei side coming out openly that like, okay, we cannot be Hitlers because even Hitler also tried to try and kill the Jews, but you could never. All these things are already there. So
See,
and all these
see,
Arambai Tengol who
Doctor,
have
Doctor,
created the Arambai Tengol who have created
Doctor,
havoc.
Dr.
Yeah.
Mary, we know the situation is
Hmm.
very delicate on the ground. It is not
Hmm.
happened today. It's been months now, altogether more than a year, that we seen the state on the edge, really up in flames. But there has to be a common ground. Mr. Tirthankar, the common ground, say to start with, is that let us condemn all sorts of violence perpetrated against anybody in the state by anybody against anybody. Let's start with that. And then we can take another next step. We can go step by step to resolve it. But at least when we talk with the people belonging to Meitei community, they say that we condemn violence. The same when we talk with the people of Kuki community, they also say that we condemn violence. So if there is a common ground, that can be the starting point for a dialogue and a resolution. What is stopping the members of the two communities to start from there?
So, Mr. Safa, first is any form of brutality against any community, I condemn it wholeheartedly, right? For every peaceful resolution of misunderstanding between any two communities, it has to start with empathy. You need
Yeah.
to understand the sensitivities of both the communities, and as you rightly said, come to a starting point where a conversation can be, started, right? And for that, you have to be empathetical, you have to be a human at the end of the day, to understand that at the end of the day, it's people and humans who are suffering, irrespective of, you're from this community or that community. Also, another thing which I would like to point out what Dr. Mary is saying is that for every statement that she's making, there's a counter statement, right? Because she's going into the nitty gritties of what's happened, which the media knows, and which has been happening to both the communities. The whole point of having this conversation is not to get into the nitty gritties of what has happened, why it has happened, but to come to a solution. Now, for us to come to a solution, it has to start with humanity and empathy. As long as we have those two pillars in place to start a dialogue, then I think something can be reached out. But the problem and issue now is that I would say the energy levels with respect to negativity in the air is so high that none of them are willing to come to that form of empathy and humanity, which should be the starting point for any peaceful understanding to start a dialogue. And I would say here is that here the civil societies and the leaders from both the civil societies need to take a proactive action and make these two as the pillars for the foundation for a dialogue to happen. And once that happens, I'm sure everything can be sorted out, provided there are no external forces which are preventing this dialogue from starting itself. We have seen multiple rounds where the government officials have spoken to leaders from both the communities, but hardly has any understanding been reached out or stated to the media in general. And I'm sure there's a reason behind this. Now, what is the reason? How big is the reason? Why are they not able to come to a conclusion or to understanding? Because I think the suffering has been so long on both the communities that if it goes beyond a certain time frame, it will be impossible to control, because this will only lead to further frustration within the population and further escalation of violence, because there is still arms and ammunition in the hands of general public. That's why I say
Right.
that the center has to take strict action in making sure that irrespective of which community, the arms and ammunition is the first thing that needs to be taken away from the public, and then create a peaceful environment for a conductive, peaceful atmosphere.
Right. Dr. Mary, again, if you're trying to find a solution to a problem, you have to start a conversation that can lead to the solution of a problem. There are common things that, as I was asking Mr. Tirthankar also, the violence has to stop. Disarming the public can go a long way to bring some sort of a peace and some sort of an end to this violence. These are common grounds that representatives and members of two communities can agree upon, and then they can find maybe solutions to larger issues which are entrenched in history and context. But at least something can be done to bring about peace. Of course, it's the government's responsibility, but not every time government cannot be blamed. It's also for the people to do something, to build bridges, to come to some sort of a common agreement.
Yeah, Jafarji, I do agree to whatever you said. And then Tirthankar also talk about empathy and all these things. It's very important. But the only thing is that, like, why I always keep on stressing about the past is that unless you heal the wound, then it can never happen. You cannot say that, oh, now it's time we have to talk. You cannot say that. You have to heal the wound of the other person who have been so pained by whatever has happened. You cannot say that, okay, uh, 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 whatever pain I feel, it's much larger than the other person's feeling. You have to start thinking, and that's the reason why I just talk about the chronology of the brutal acts which has been committed. I'm not going to name even the community also. So that's the reason why it's very important. I took the example of that mentally special like disabled person. Is that like the lady was killed after that? Like one Naga women who was also mentally retarded was killed, thinking that like she's a cookie. So but even for that, like immediately the government came up and gave some ex gratia and all those compensation and everything. So that's where like the government is should play a very important role, saying that like to all whoever has suffered, like equal type of action has to be taken, so that like people don't feel that okay, the government is biased. So these are things like it's not like just an assumption that like the government is one sided. So there are certain acts and certain things which the government has done it where we have been always telling about that. So I really feel that because for me alone, like as a person, like I cannot say like the government has to be set an example where it has to say, but this is the reason why I've been telling. And then you talk about conversation, but conversation, there are, I'm sure like there are so many people who have led the conversation where people can talk. But the only thing is that unless the government comes out, at least I'm just thinking of just now that like at least that we let 10 MLAs feel comfortable first to come to Imphal so that they are not scared of their lives. Then they are our representatives. Once they feel so, then it will be much comfortable for the other people that to set feet on Imphal Valley. So these
Right.
are the things which the government has to do either at the state level or the central level. So
Right.
we don't know what exactly is happening. I'm not going to blame anybody, but these are steps which the government has to do. They are
Right.
still our representatives.
Right. Of
So
course, everybody
that
has a.
should be the first one.
Of
At the
course.
personal level, I also many people have been in talking terms, but doesn't mean that like we can change the whole scenario at the ground level.
Right.
So
Of
these
course,
are very
everybody
important steps, which
everybody
yeah.
has a responsibility. The people have the
Hmm.
responsibility. The government has the responsibility. The center has the responsibility. The fact is that the state needs a healing touch that encompasses all the communities in that state, all the people in that state who have suffered and are suffering. We'll have to leave it here. Thanks to both our panelists for joining us, and thanks to our viewers for watching the Mojo Story.
Okay. Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.